we've got new Maryland men, 2 Maryland men. See if this sounds familiar. They've been arrested over the murder of a 23-year-old mother whose body was found on April 17th, buried outside the Cedarville State Forest in Prince George's County. That's the same county where Kilmer Abrego Garcia lived, you know, the other great Maryland man. This reporting from Andy No tells it all. Illegal immigrant Casey Robinson Alexi Barrera Rosa. How come they all have so many names? 24 years old, was arrested outside of the state and will be transported back to Maryland to face charges. Rolvin Eduardo Barrera, there's got to be a story there, 37 years old of unknown immigration status, was charged with being an accessory to the murder. This is the latest murder of a woman in Maryland involving suspects who are illegal foreign nationals. That's Casey Robinson Alexi Barrera. And no, excuse me, that's Barrera Rosa. I apologize, sir. Rolvin Eduardo Barrera. They look like great Maryland men, don't they? Loving fathers. I bet one of their children is autistic. That's the woman that they brutally murdered. This is what it's like living in Maryland right now. The unhidden story or untold story about Prince George's County in particular is that it is a hotbed for MS-13 violence and gangs. That's why the Prince George's County Police Department has a gang unit that is so well-versed in identifying gang members, specifically MS-13 gang members. Chris Van Hollen, though, and the Democrats, they don't care about that. They only care about, I guess, scoring political points against Donald Trump because they think that they're fighting, and so that's all that matters. Where we Americans, we look at it and say, okay, you're fighting, but who are you fighting for? And it certainly doesn't seem like they're fighting for the victims of these heinous crimes. 4 more Democrats are now heading to El Salvador, and we say, go for it. Terrific. Why should Chris Van Hollen be the only one to end his political future? They're going to go fight for the release of Abrego Garcia. It's Representative Maxine Dexter of Oregon, Representative Robert Garcia of California, Representative Yasaman Ansari of Arizona, and Representative Maxwell Alejandro Frost of Florida. There's the 4 of them, and they're all going to be traveling together. James Comer, the chairman of the Oversight Committee, has declared that no congressional funds will go to pay for these trips. So I guess they're getting funded by their own personal campaigns or from maybe an outside group, maybe La Raza or one of those open borders crowds. I say to Chairman Comer, as much as I appreciate him trying to protect taxpayer dollars, back off, bud. Let them go. In fact, Republicans in charge of the House right now, they should be financing these trips. It'll ensure a larger majority come the next election day. Chris Van Hollen, who did confirm over the weekend that he used taxpayer dollars for his trip, that was just one of the small headlines out of this entire escapade. He did the full Ginsburg, although technically it wasn't really the full Ginsburg because he just sat in a studio and they changed the backdrop behind him. It was Mr. Ginsburg, the lawyer for Monica Lewinsky, who actually went from studio to studio in Washington, D.C. to appear on all the Sunday shows. That's what we call a full Ginsburg in D.C. because we're nerds. But he did appear on all the shows. Here he is with Dana Bash in a remarkable exchange while you hear Chris Van Hollen ruin his political career and maybe of Westmore, the governor of Maryland, and all the other Democrats who said, yeah, go, Chris, go. We're with you. I want you to pay close attention to the look on Dana Bash's face as she can't believe this guy is the moron that he pretends to be.
Now, President Trump says that some of Abrego Garcia's tattoos signify that he's a member of MS-13. In 2019, police alleged a confidential informant claimed that Abrego Garcia was an active MS-13 member. His wife and his attorney deny that, of course. Can you say with absolute certainty that he is not, nor has he ever been a member of the MS-13 gang? And did you ask him point blank?
Well, Dana, what Donald Trump is trying to do here is change the subject. The subject at hand is that he and his administration are defying a court order to give Abrego Garcia his due process rights. They are trying to litigate on social media what they should be doing in the courts. They need to put up or shut up in the courts. Let me tell you, and I decided to write this down so I could be absolutely accurate as to what Federal District Court Judge Zinnes said about these allegations by the Trump administration. Quote, "No evidence linking Abrego Garcia to MS-13 or any terrorist activity has been presented to the court." That's where to litigate this. It's been litigated in many other places. So I'm not going to get into the details because the whole purpose of our court system is for them to adjudicate these things, not for Donald Trump to go off on social media.
Yeah, you're right. They have not, there hasn't been a court hearing for them to put forward evidence in the first place, which is your whole point. But since you were the one person to have met with him, and since this is a thing, you say on social media, it's what we hear from Donald Trump and Republicans every day, all day long, you didn't ask him?
I didn't ask him that because I know what his answer is. What he told me was he was sad and traumatized that he was being in prison because he has committed no crimes. And that goes to the heart of this issue because he's being denied his due process rights. And Donald Trump is trying to change the subject. And, you know, when people start asking that question, in my view, they're falling into the president's trap because what the president wants to do is talk about that as if we can't all fight gang violence, which I've been doing for much longer than Donald Trump, right? His argument is you can't fight that and at the same time uphold people's constitutional rights. That's a very dangerous view. And if we deny the constitutional rights of this one man, it threatens the constitutional rights of everybody in America.
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, like I said, he's a moron and he's ruining his political career. Every time he says Donald Trump's trying to change the subject, all he wants to do is talk about violent illegal immigrant gangs. Someone needs to remind Chris Van Hollen that that is the freaking subject. That's the whole point. It's Chris Van Hollen who spent the last 2 weeks saying this is a kind and loving Maryland man. He's just a good father, and I'm just going to go take care of my fellow American, my constituent. He's my dude. And so at some point, I think it's fair to say, okay, he's your guy, but is he a member of the gang or not? Because then the follow-up question is, do you agree with President Trump that MS-13 is a terrorist organization? Love to hear his position on that. Nobody asked. Also, as Chris Van Hollen says that he doesn't want to talk about those things because that's changing the subject, I understand him trying to avoid it because, you see, this is the subject. That would be the Maryland woman who got brutally murdered. This is the subject. One of the suspects in that murder. Here's the other one. In Prince George's County, Maryland, members of MS-13. When Chris Van Hollen grandstands and tries to play the tough guy and say, I've been fighting MS-13 gangs longer than Donald Trump has, the answer is, how's that working out, Chris? You may be fighting, but you're not winning. You're losing the fight. Anybody can fight, but if they constantly lose, what's the point? If you've been fighting MS-13 in your state of Maryland so long, how come women keep getting raped and murdered? Of course, nobody asked that question either. Boy, why, is this why they don't give me a Sunday show? So here he is on Fox News Sunday. Shannon Bream actually got some good questions in. She's the only one that actually asked pertinent questions, other than Dana asking the basic, you know, did you ask him if he was MS-13? But there could be some follow-ups there. Like, did you not ask him because you don't want to know? Did you not ask him because that complicates your messaging? Does it matter to you if he is a member of MS-13? If he's a member of MS-13, do you agree that it's a gang? And do you agree that President Trump should do something about it since no one else is? How many arrests have happened of MS-13 gang members in Prince George's County, and how many of them have been handed over to ICE? How about in the entire state of Maryland? Why doesn't Montgomery County, your county in Maryland, why don't they cooperate with ICE? Why do they let people back out on the streets instead of handing them over to federal authorities? These are all great follow-up questions, Dana. You were so close. How's that journalism degree working out? Here's Shannon Bream.
Did you ask him if he has any association with MS-13?
I did not ask him directly because he's answered that question repeatedly, as his lawyers have. My purpose in going there was to, number one, see if he was alive, see if he was healthy, take his story. As I said, they have litigated this.
Okay, so he was just there to check his pulse, and there he is reaching over and trying to hold his hand and check his pulse, I suppose. It doesn't matter to me if he's a gang member or not. That's not the point. That's not why I was there. Really? Okay, does it matter to you that your constituents, U.S. citizens, taxpayers are being murdered by members of that gang? Doesn't that sort of up the ante, Chris Van Hollen?
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared
So
on a
taxpayer
bipartisan
dollars.
basis. Yes, like every other trip.
Who did?
I do like that. Who paid for the trip? Well, this was official. That's not the question. Who paid for the trip? Well, Shannon, you paid for this trip. And then turned to the camera. And so did all of you. What about Rachel Morin?
Neglected.
I don't
and
think that's
no,
not
that-
the question. I think
that
it's about
is.
the mother being unable to understand why you would spend so much time and energy for this person who was not in your state or in the country legally, at which time she felt like you didn't have the same concern about her daughter and her family.
I did have concern. I have concern. My heart goes out to every Maryland family that is the victim of violence, regardless of the perpetrator.
So it's interesting. And again, I like Shannon Bream. I think she does a good job. But the question is not whether he had any concern for the victims of gang murders in his state, because, see, he can lie about that. He can lie about what his feels are, what he holds in his heart. No, the problem isn't whether you had any concern over the family of Rachel Morin. The question is whether you showed any concern over that family, which you have not. You still do not. Sorry, going on a Sunday show and awkwardly answering a question about it, the one question he was asked about it, isn't the same thing as actually doing something. I have all the feels. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Well, you see, he has concerns over Rachel Morin's family, he claims. He has concerns over Abrego Garcia, he claims. But only one person actually got action from Senator Van Hollen. He only traveled to go express concern and show his feelings for one of those people. And I think that matters. Yeah, Chris Van Hollen's done, and he's probably dragging Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, down with him. They both want to run for president, it appears. Otherwise, why else would Chris Van Hollen do this? The sad thing is Chris Van Hollen's behavior here may help him with the base of the Democrat Party. They may love the fact that he fights. The rest of America is saying, okay, I don't care if he fights, who's he fighting for? And then when you find out, yeah, not so popular. Sadly, with the Democrats these days, the fact that he's fighting for an illegal immigrant gang member may help him out with the base, but it certainly doesn't help him in a general election. And since Governor Wes Moore is sort of stuck rooting him on too, this may hurt Wes Moore too. Watch Wes Moore to distance himself from this. But ultimately, whether it's Democrats going down to El Salvador and trying to jump on the Chris Van Hollen bandwagon so they can go down with the ship too or not, that's obviously a big part of this story. But I still find the most important driving part of this story the media's behavior. Not only the media's behavior asking the same rubber-stamped, stupid template questions of Chris Van Hollen instead of actually challenging him on this issue, and maybe asking this, because you keep saying it's due process, sir. Can you describe what the due process is here? Because last I checked, Barack Obama sent a drone attack to kill an American citizen who he deemed to be a member of a terrorist organization. That's right. During Obama's presidency, an American citizen joined ISIS, and Obama sent a drone to kill him. There was no due process there. Obama was the commander-in-chief. He was protecting our national security, and he killed it. I may not have liked it. You may not have liked it, but there's no doubt that he has that power to do so as commander-in-chief and to be the sole exclusive man in charge of our national security. This president has now deemed MS-13 and TDA to be terrorist organizations, just like ISIS. So you tell me what's worse. Gathering these people up, putting them in front of an immigration judge giving them a deportation order, and then sending these people to a prison in El Salvador because their own country won't take them. Is that worse? Or is Obama actually flattening a dude in the desert with a drone without due process? And that guy ain't an illegal alien. That guy was an American citizen. But I didn't hear anybody on any of these shows challenging Chris Van Hollen on that. How can you support Obama doing that to an American citizen, but you don't support Donald Trump merely deporting an illegal immigrant who didn't give a crap about due process when he entered our country illegally? But despite all of that, none of those journalists, teleprompter readers actually had the worst performance over the course of the last 3 days when it comes to this story. That dubious distinction goes to a football player, Michael Strahan. Michael Strahan was interviewing the wife of the MS-13 gang member. You know her. She's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars on GoFundMe, despite the fact that she put in multiple requests for restraining orders because she claimed that her loving, wonderful Maryland man, nowhere near an MS-13 violent gang member, was beating the crap out of her. And she swore that in affidavits to the police. But now she's saying he's a wonderful man. Somebody's lying here. So here's Michael Strahan. Good Morning America. ABC News decides to have the football player conduct the interview. And here's the one question he asked about that critical issue with regard to her credibility on this.
I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and I'm not going to push on that apparently, but how much hope?
Let's go through this together so we can see just how atrocious this lamentable display of journalism was, shall we? First, watch how he sets up the question.
I have to ask it.
I have to ask it. Have you ever noticed whatever a reporter or a journalist asks a question that they're not happy they are going to ask, like they're apologizing before they even pose the question? Gee, I'm sorry. I have to ask this only because people will make fun of me if I don't. It's actually a verbal cue to the person that you're interviewing that they don't really have to answer it. Oh, really? You're giving me a get out of jail free card here. You're backing into the question. You're apologizing to me before you even ask it. I don't want you to be mad at me, but I have to ask this question. Okay, so I have to ask it. And then what's the question?
You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
That's not the question. That's not the question. Clearly, you were in fear of your husband. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. But now you're saying that he's a loving, gentle father. So did you lie to the police, or are you lying to us right now? That's how you ask the question. Or maybe how many times did he beat you up before you eventually called the police? Because the track record for abused wives, sadly, is that they take it for many years before they finally call the police on their husband. See, if you really wanted to get to the truth, if you wanted to marginalize the person that you're interviewing to test and push their credibility, that's how you would ask this. Michael Strahan either has no interest in doing this or he doesn't have the skills. But here's the thing. I think he has the skills because he's actually tougher when he's interviewing NFL players on Fox NFL Sunday. And somehow ABC News decided, yeah, let's have Strahan do this one. So then he asks the question, were you in fear for your life? And she freaking freezes, right? He just asked the question. And now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Husband is alive.
7 seconds. 7 seconds trying to remember what her answer needs to be. And what's the answer?
That's all I can say.
My husband's alive. That's all I can say. That's a hell of an answer, isn't it? So is this like, speaking of ISIS, is this like an ISIS hostage video? Are there members of MS-13 just off camera with machetes waiting to take care of business if she answers wrong? Do you fear for your life right now, ma'am? Blink twice if you need help. You put in a police report against your husband a couple of years ago. Were you in fear for your life? And her answer is, well, he's alive. That's all I can say. And the pièce de résistance, the chef's kiss, the journalism award, I'm waiting for Michael Strahan to get his Pulitzer on this one, is what he says after that.
Okay. And I'm not going to push on that, apparently. But
well, okay, I'm not going to push you on that. Why would I push you on that? That's what a reporter would do, or a journalist, or somebody who gets paid millions of dollars on a network morning show. That's the kind of thing they would do, but not me. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's exactly what I get. I get millions of dollars to interview you on a morning show. Not going to push you on that. You know I'm not going to push you on that, he said. Why did he put it that way? I'll tell you why he put it that way. Because this was prearranged with her attorneys. Okay, you get one question about that, but that's not why we're here. And if you ask more questions, you're violating our agreement. We'll give you the exclusive. Good Morning America gets the get. But you get one question, no follow-ups. That's why she gave a completely evasive, nonsensical answer. And his response was, well, I guess I'm not going to push you on that. Because she did know he wasn't going to push her on that. Because that was the prearrangement. This is how the networks function. You deserve a better media, I promise you. And that's why you're here. Hopefully, we do a better job than they do. Although I promise you, we don't make as much money.